Hi everybody, Matt back with you. Hope you're okay. Today I'm in Huddersfield and I'm out filming our fourth victim of the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe. This is a kind of infrequent series we do on the channel. Every 4 months I'll head to a location and hopefully find a grave for one of the victims of the Yorkshire Ripper. This area I'm in here is called Great Northern Street, and back in the 70s was the location where Sutcliffe took his 8th victim, Helen Rytka, an 18-year-old who was a prostitute in this area. I'll tell her story perhaps a bit later. This area was the red light district for Huddersfield at the time, and apparently possibly still is today. Obviously not this time of day, hopefully. As always, when we do these stories, you know, we're not called the dark side of the moor for nothing. This is a pretty dark and gruesome tale, so if you're not into this kind of thing, just click to the next one. Yeah, this is the story of Helen Rytka. It's quite a windy day today. Apologies if you can't hear me. And I have had a few comments recently about the volume on this. I will rectify it soon. If anyone can suggest a specific good microphone for putting attached to a phone, just let me know. I'm not often great with technology. But this is Great Northern Street, and this is where Helen and her sister Rita, who were only 17, 18 at the time, they would come here, and they would often be around what was a toilet block, and they would be there for men to come and pick them up. And yeah, so young. And this was at the height of the Yorkshire Ripper notoriety, and they'd moved from Bradford. They'd been on prostituting in Manningham Lane in Bradford, and moved to somewhere perhaps a little bit safer. They came here to Huddersfield, and unfortunately this was also at the time that the Ripper was expanding his boundaries himself. How they went about it, they knew they were possibly in danger even here, so they would kind of go at the same time with a client, and they would time 20 minutes and then be dropped off back at the toilets 20 minutes later. On this particular occasion, Helen was back here and Rita wasn't, and the Ripper came past, and he persuaded Helen to come with him to a timber yard just at the back of here for a quick session. Unfortunately, it was the worst decision she ever made. Now, the buildings that are here today, these were not about in the 1970s. These are newer buildings. It's kind of a retail park here. But where he took Helen was to the timber yard, which is up behind that building where the viaduct is now. I don't know quite how much I'm going to be able to film because businesses are open. I'll see if I can find a spot, but we certainly won't be getting too near to it today, I'm afraid. Like I say, I'll film what I can, but I'm quite aware I'm sticking my nose into literal people's businesses here. So if we get around the corner and look back, we'll see where the yard was. It's now a scrap merchant. So it's at the end there, and there are people outside working, so that's as close as I'm getting. Yeah, very busy street of garages. Just smells of garages down there. Lots of people, so yeah, I can't film there today. So instead, this is what happened. This is the unpleasant bit. Peter Sutcliffe was a truck driver from Bingley. By 1978, he'd already killed 7 other people. On January 31st, 1978, Peter Sutcliffe saw Helen Rytka waiting for her sister Rita to come back, and he convinced her to go into Garrard's timber yard on Lower Viaduct Street in Huddersfield. Despite only just picking up Helen from the toilet block, Sutcliffe made an excuse that he needed the toilet. She waited in the yard for him. But in actual fact, he went back to his car for what became his usual weapons. Returning, he attacked Helen with a hammer, but he suddenly stopped when he noticed 2 taxis were opposite him. Sadly, neither of the taxi drivers spotted anything out of the ordinary and drove away, with Helen moaning on the floor. Sutcliffe had sexual intercourse with her. She was the only one of his eventual 13 victims he ever had sex with. When Sutcliffe went to retrieve his hammer, he noticed that Helen was back on her feet again, and obviously really fighting for life, and she was staggering back towards the car. So he picked up the hammer and he basically smashed her again on the head and on her back, and she collapsed in front of the car. He went into the car, got his knife, and then went back to Helen and proceeded to stab her altogether 13 times in the heart and chest. Some of the wounds were apparently in almost exactly the same place. Horrific. It was 3 days it took Rita, Helen's sister, to report her missing. The yard opened for work the next morning, and the workmen were quite surprised to notice splatters of blood on the floor and a pair of black panties stuck on the door of the yard. However, they were quite aware that lots went on in that area, just went about their business. However, once Helen's sister had explained the likely location of the disappearance, the police descended. And on the 3rd of February, Helen's body was discovered in the timber yard. Fear created by Peter Sutcliffe back in the 1970s was very, very real for people living at the time. And over the other videos we've done, and you can find those here, there are comments on there from people who did live at the time, and they talk about what was happening at the time. Don't go out on your own, don't go out in the dark, be home as quick as you can. Lasted for 5 years, and it's very easy to forget that today. Just quite what a monster was at large in the north of England. Half a decade. We do these videos to ensure it's the victims, though, that are not forgotten in these horrific tales. We're going to head now to Bradford, to Scolmore Cemetery, and find the last resting place of Helen Rytka. Oh, wow. Okay, Tom's come to join me for the search, so we're now in Scolmore Cemetery. This is massive, I've never been here before. Huge cemetery, it's kind of borderline Undercliff size from what we're looking at. But yeah, let's see if we can find the final resting place of Helen Rytka.
Elizabeth, relic of Daniel Ward.
All right. Okay, so we're still searching for the grave here. Funny enough, I don't think I've ever told you the reason why Peter Sutcliffe went on his murdering spree. Now, I think in the 60s, 1960s, he was actually a grave digger, and he was doing things wrong then. He was digging up bodies and doing all sorts of taking things from the graves, so he wasn't acting right then either. But he believed that when he was once digging a grave, that from a gravestone the voice of God told him to kill prostitutes. This was the 1960s, so I believe he'd still attacked quite a few between the 60s and 1975. It was only in 1975 when it turned to murder after that. But he even claimed that till his dying day, that it was the voice of God coming from a grave telling him to rid the world of prostitutes. Yeah, that's why apparently he went on to commit his crimes. Alright, I think we're in the right kind of area. Right, here we are. We are at the final resting place of Helen Rytka, 1959, 1978. She was only 18 years old when the Ripper killed her. Gosh, obviously just, I have a funny feeling this is quite recent because it looks quite new. So I'm wondering if this has always been like an unmarked grave before. But at least she's remembered now. Rest in peace, Helen. Remembered by the public as the 8th victim of Peter Sutcliffe, but privately by her friends and family in a very different way. Rest in peace, Helen. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again for the next video very soon. Bye for now.